Okay, so we can get started now. Really pleased with the turnout we had. As I said, about 100 people register. We've got about 65 people who have signed on, so I expect more will be joining as we proceed. Really, this was intended to be a discussion, not a presentation. And so I did make some notes and have some ideas that I want to share with you, but I'm really hoping that that we can use this as an occasion for a more open discussion than any kind of presentation, because frankly, there's not all that much to present. I'm also trying to moderate the discussion and keep track of people who want to speak, questions that are posted, so bear with me if I get somewhat lost in trying to track everything or if I don't recognize you right away. We started out suggesting this webinar to discuss the increase in VOCA funding for fiscal year 15, and then OVC released the revised performance measures, and so we thought this would also be a good opportunity to get some input, some feedback, and some comments from you on that. We scheduled this for an hour and a half. If we go longer, that would be fine. If we don't use up all the time, that would be fine. As I said, I hope this is mostly an opportunity for all of you to have a discussion, identify questions, share your comments or concerns, and then maybe we can help identify some of the things that we need to find out. So I'll just quickly, the way I think we can organize the discussion, if you see your raise hand feature, that will tell me you want to speak. I can unmute your phones and then you can talk. As I said, bear with me if I don't see your raised hand right away. I'll try to manage this as quickly as I can. If you want to write something up, there's a chat feature, and you can post questions or comments either using the chat box, or there's also a question and answer box, either one. And again, I'll be trying to monitor those and get to those as quickly as I can. I also want to let you know that I'm recording this. There were several people who said they weren't able to participate and wanted to know if it would be recorded. I'm recording it mostly for my own sake, so I can keep notes and track of the discussion and the concerns and maybe summarize those later on. The discussion will only be posted on the restricted site that's available only for VOCA Assistance Administrators, so I don't want you to feel chilled or constrained in your discussion. It's only be kept among ourselves, so feel free to say what you'd like. And I'm seeing Jeffrey, you got your hand raised. You want to say something? Jeffrey, you're unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
No? Did you want to say something, Jeff? No. And then I got Leslie. I don't know if we can hear you. You're okay. Well, I know a lot of people are joining us to try to get some information. So that sort of summarizes my feeling about where we are. There are a lot of things that we know. There are some things we think we know, and there are a lot of things we don't know. And as I said earlier, I'm not sure that this webinar will give you a lot of hard and fast information, but I'll share with you what I do know, and hopefully we can proceed from there by identifying the questions and trying to get answers to some things that will help you do your jobs better. I know it struck me there's an awful lot of things going on all at once that makes your jobs both exciting and challenging. We've got this huge increase in VOCA funding. We're dealing with the revised performance measure data collection system. OVC regulations, I've gotten several questions from people. When are they going to come out? All I know about that is I'm being told by OVC they hope to have them finalized by the end of this month, but there are no promises, and it's really not within OVC's control because it has to be reviewed by the lawyers, by DOJ, by OMB, and so that's maybe an optimistic guess, but that's what it's being suggested to me that OVC hopes to get them out by the end of January. The other point that's being made, at least as a general observation about the regulations, is they're really not going to, all they're going to do is expand your discretion, your opportunity to do things or to fund things. So it shouldn't be anything that would require you to restrict any activities or stop allowing things that you're now currently doing. So it would be, it's seen, at least by OVC, as a more expansive authorization for states and not a more restrictive one. But again, there are some things, I don't totally agree with that if it's based on the proposed regs, because I noticed some things in the proposed regs that would actually restrict some things, some uses of the VOCA funds. But we'll have to wait and see what the final regs come out with. And then finally, I know, there was an election in November. There's changes of administration. People may be changing jobs, or they may be having new supervisors, department heads, what have you. So all of those things sort of are coming all at once, and I know that makes life a little challenging for you. So with regard to the funding, what do we know? We know that the cap is going to increase from $745 million to $2.361 billion. We don't know who did that or why they did it. There's been a lot of speculation. I've tried through some of our congressional contacts to find out sort of what was going on. We just don't know. Nobody is taking credit or blame, what have you, or what the reasoning or the strategy is for doing this. There have been efforts over the last several years to get an increase in the cap. We know the deposits into the fund have been skyrocketing, and all of those things may have combined to cause the appropriators to simply say, we're going to release this money. There have been efforts to try to, in some ways, force them to raise the cap. And so it may be that, again, this is speculation, it may be that they simply said, we're not going to make anybody require us to do it, we'll just do it on our own, and thereby they retain something that's very important to them, which is their committee's jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of the committee, that they still control how much is being spent, which is their prerogative, and they don't want to sort of give that up by being forced through legislation or otherwise to determine the spending level. The big question is, will this be a one-time windfall or the new normal, the new funding level? We don't know that. And to me, that is probably the number one question that everybody needs to know in order to figure out how to best manage this money. And we'll get into some of that discussion. We don't know exactly when you're going to get the grants. Last year it took a long time. We do know that OVC is required to submit a report on increasing their oversight. That's a 45-day report, which would make it sometime early February. We know the Inspector General is being given $10 million, that's coming out of the VOCA cap, for increased oversight. And those of you who lived through the Recovery Act will know that's not always a pleasant experience. The point is that there's going to be an awful lot of scrutiny. There's going to be an awful lot of accountability. And we know that DOJ has to submit a spending plan. There's no firm deadline on when that's required. It's for the entire agency. The big question, as far as we're concerned, is how much of the VOCA cap is OJP going to asked for its management and administration. I could do a whole webinar on the problems with how they've been doing it. I think it will result in a hefty increase in how much they've been taking from VOCA. I'm not sure how much of it is going to be justified, even with the large increase in the VOCA cap. I'm not sure how much of it will be reflected in increased OJP administrative costs. Some of it will be, but I'm not sure it's commensurate with the dollar increase. The spending plan was the big issue, the big delay in getting last year's grants. Last year I kept hearing it's been submitted, it hasn't been submitted, it's been approved, it hasn't. But that's the big holdup on when OJP can actually calculate how much the VOCA grants will be, and this is not something OVC controls, but it's something that hopefully will be done quicker. The appropriations bill was enacted sooner than it was the previous year, and I'm hopeful that you'll be able to see them, this may be optimistic, by March or April. My calculations, again, making some assumptions primarily about how much OJP is going to take from M&A, but I'm guessing that your FY15 grants for assistance will be about 3 to 4 times the size of your 14 grants. So it'll be at least a tripling, maybe 3.5, maybe 4, somewhere in that range. For those of you who've been around and remember 1997, we got triple the grants without any expectation of that in 1 year, and states had to scramble to figure out how to spend that money. We're in a similar situation, although at a much larger dollar amount. I've gotten questions about the admin funds. The appropriation does not change any substantive legislative or statutory provisions for VOCA, so the admin training funds will stay at 5%. But of course, that 5% is going to be based on a much larger VOCA grant. So you'll be getting, again, 3 to 4 times the amount available for your admin and training funds. Recognizing that there'll be need for increased monitoring, increased training. The increased grants along with the performance measures is going to put increased pressure or need for upgrading, enhancing your grant management systems. And I think here again it goes back to the question of, is this a one-time or ongoing funding level? Are states going to be willing to hire, put on additional staff to handle this additional funding load if they don't know this is going to continue? So I think that's a question. I've got a question here, which I'm not sure I understand. It's from Kara Webster. Kara, I'm going to unmute you. Oh, Kara? Kara, are you there? Well, the question is, can VOCA funds be used to provide VIX giftee cards to purchase food or clothes in emergency situations? I'm not sure I understand what VIX giftee cards are. So I'm afraid I can't answer that. Kara is not answering. Okay, I'll mute you again. Okay, what are some of the other things that we know? We know you have right now under the statute the year of the award plus 3 to expend each grant. So if you get the grants, say by April or so, in fact you'll have maybe 3.5 years to spend that money. Again, another big the unknown is this one time or not is going to come into play. When we did a survey a while back of how you manage the grants, about 40% of the states that responded, we had about 43 responses, about 40% of those said they award their entire grant every year. And I think especially with this large infusion of funds, I'd suggest those states consider some other approach to managing the grants, to spreading them out to holding back a reserve. There are different strategies that I hope we can discuss. One of those I'll be talking about in another bit. About half of the states do hold back some money to reserve as a reserve. I mean, here we're dealing with a situation. Frankly, I think one of the things that we're going to be looked at by the appropriators, I think one of the answers to the question, is this one time or ongoing, is going to be the extent to which we appropriately spend down the money. The appropriators have, for a number of years, been very conscious of the obligations. So they're going to look and see, how are we spending this money? Are we spending this money? And so how we manage it and use that money is going to be very important. We also know that half of the states are now managing 3 grants simultaneously. So, by the time you get this money and start spending it, and some of you may already have been making plans as to how you're going to spend it. I know some of you are already in the process of soliciting applications for your FY15 funding cycle. You may be looking at another large grant, and so you're going to have to balance 2 or 3 grants at the same time and figure out how you're going to spend that, how you're going to manage it, how are you going to stabilize program funding. And I think that's a big challenge, and there are different ways of approaching it. Okay, one of the obvious reasons for increasing the VOCA funding is to increase the level of services. Now again, I'll refer back to the experience in '97 when we got triple the grants. To the extent that we are funding more services, either through adding new subgrantees or expanding existing subgrantees, by and large you're adding staff. And that to me raises a real serious question. Not only getting staff, but do we know who we're getting? Do we know what their training is, what their qualifications are? I know when I was doing this in '97, I was very concerned as to who we're putting on the front lines of providing victim services. Do they know what they're doing? Simply filling positions isn't enough. That was one of the reasons why back then I thought it was very important that OVC in the states have more resources for training, for professional development, for credentialing, you name it. And I think that's something we've got to be very conscious about. We know, for example, in LEAA, for those of you who remember that, it just takes a couple of really bad headlines of the misuse or abuse of federal programs to undercut the credibility of that program. And so we need to keep track of who's providing the services and what their training is, what their qualifications are. Simply filling positions is not going to be enough. And along with that, and this is a problem we've addressed, is simply the level of compensation. And I've always thought it's very difficult to just use VOCA to help increase staff salaries. If you're a program manager and you've got 5 advocates and 2 are funded by VOCA, can you give them a raise because VOCA's giving you more money but not the other 3 because those funders aren't increasing it? So that's a real genuine problem. I'm not sure VOCA by itself is the sole answer for doing it. Maybe there's some strategies we can discuss about doing that. Finally, well, I shouldn't say finally, but one of the things that I've been pushing and I want to talk to you about is the notion of using this increased funding for one-time non-recurring projects, particularly infrastructure and technology. We did a survey a year ago. We had about 2,300 responses. Last year I distributed to you the statistical responses from each state and asked if you were able to get more VOCA funds, how would you use it? And we specifically asked about what kinds of infrastructure technology projects would you be able to use? And I was really impressed with the demand out there for these kinds of projects. One of the things that I've done, and I'll be sending to you, is I've put together a document that shows the responses from each state. So not so much so that you can see individual agencies or what they're saying their need, but to give you a sense of what the need is within your states. It's amazing to me how many programs were in facilities that are over 100 years old or are using Windows XP technology. So I just wanted to share with you the responses to give you a sense and to help you sort out how you can use this money. One of the advantages I think for using one-time non-recurring projects, it's a way to help you manage the money, particularly if you're finding programs are having to underspend or deobligate. You might be able to use those for additional drawdowns as you get further into the project period. So it's just, to me, a valuable tool to help you not only to address the needs in the field for increased capacity, but also to help you manage how you distribute those funds. There is a question here about match, and match is going to be a genuine problem. I've talked to OVC about it. I talked to them specifically about waiving match for these one-time infrastructure technology projects, because those could be, those could use a lot of money, and it would be very difficult to spend that money if match is required. Match is not a statutory requirement. It's something imposed by OVC. They can waive it. They have a lower match for Indian tribes. Their proposed regulations would eliminate the match for Indian tribes. The response they gave me was they can waive match, but they're told by their lawyers it has to be on a case-by-case basis. I raised the prospect, for example, of a state providing match for all of their sub-grantees, or a number of them at the state level. They don't know that they can do that because they need to do this on sort of a agency by agency or case by case basis. But it's something that I've been discussing with them, and I think they're appreciative of the problem about match. So again, to repeat, I think one of the main goals here is to avoid deobligations, to use different strategies, different approaches to managing the funds. Okay, so that's sort of my spiel. I want to open it up to you guys for your questions and discussions and to share your thoughts. I do have a question here. Joe, you have a question. You say, what about state staff? I've unmuted you, Joe. Could you explain what your question is? Are you there? I am not hearing. Joe, can you hear me? You're self-muted. Can you unmute yourself and discuss what your question is? Hi, Joe. I'm not hearing you. Okay, here's a question from Donna in Iowa. For the states that are holding back funds for stabilizing, what percentage are they considering holding back or already hold back? Does anybody want to jump in on that? I'm not hearing anybody. Joe, you're still unmuted. Jeff, do you have... Okay. We have a question here. How many states will be hiring new staff? Does anybody have any specific plans? Gary, you're unmuted. Gary? I don't know if there's a problem here because I'm not hearing anybody. I'm unmuting. There we go. I hear an echo. You're very faint. Can you get closer maybe to a phone?
Yeah, we're in our conference room. Our microphones are in the ceiling. We can stand them on the table. I'm not sure about the
No,
line.
don't do that.
We'll try to be really loud.
Steve, one of the things we're looking at, we have developed a chart to look at, the possible appropriation or awarding of grant funds, the calculation. And what we've done is taken the projected amount that we might receive. Say, for example, first of all, they said $18 million from the state of Utah. Then, in sort of a webinar or a discussion with the office, I think it was on the Center for Victims of Crime, who held one a week or so ago, a discussion. They said that that OVC could take out 8% off the top. So we calculated 8% off the top, and that would leave us about $16,560,000.
Excuse me, Christine, what was that 8% for?
The 8% was discussed at the National Victim Center kind of webinar that we had last week or so. And they said that OVC can take up to 8%.
Yeah, that's not exactly correct. I was on that webinar, although I missed the beginning of it. 8% is how much OJP has traditionally been taking, or roughly been taking, for their M&A. OVC gets 5%, roughly 5% of what's left over from the cap after the federal set-asides in the Children's Justice Act. My projection of roughly $2 billion of the 2.3 billion, my projection is that the state assistance grants will get about $2 billion of that, and that would be after OVC's 5%. And that's what I calculated the increase in your grants to be. That's where I come up between 3 to 4 times your 15 or your 14 grants.
Okay. Well, just say hypothetically then that the state of Utah is going to receive like $16.5 million, which is about 4 times what we received before, because it was like $4.3 million.
Right.
But then, off the top of that, we calculated the administrative funds as 5%, and deducted that. That leaves us with 15.7. Then we took a base of $4 million, which was what we've been awarding for about the last several 3-4 years. So we took the base off of the 15.7 million, which leaves us with 11.7 million. Then we divided that 11.7 million by 4, which then we look at the amount of funding we're going to award for the next 4 years, which in combination with the $4 million and the $2.9 million, we'd be awarding about $6.9 to $7 million a year for the next, for 15, 16, 17, and 18, in order to expand the 2015 money. So that's just an initial approach we're using for planning. Now, if we go into the next program year, again, we calculated that we wouldn't receive any less than $4 million, because that's what we've received in the past. So that, again, would be the base that we would take out the grant funds, and then we would still have the $2.9 million and still be able to go ahead and award like $7 million for that 17 and 18. However, if the fund stayed up higher, then you would automatically have take the base of $4 million out of that, divide that again by 4, and then you would add that. So if you got the same amount, if you received the same amount that you did for 2015, if the state did, and you got that same amount for 2016, then you essentially would have another 2.9 million or 3 million, which would take you up to about, you would the next year, in order to expend the increase of money that came down on 216, you would have to expend like 9.8 to 10 million. So anyway, we've got a chart, and we've worked it out, and are looking at it in those different ways. And again, as the numbers become known, we just plug them in and look at it.
Would you share that? If you share that with me, I'll post it on our website so other people can look at how you're doing it. But as I understand it, basically what you're saying is you're spreading out the funds over, or the amount you estimate over, you're saying 4 years. I think in practice it's probably closer to 3.5 to 3 years when you actually get it. But the approach would be the same, and then that would sort of be like a rolling amount of the increased funding that you're expecting to get. It sounds to me like you're maintaining your current base of funding and then spreading out the increase. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And if you have a chart that helps you calculate that, that would be very handy to share with others.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll get that to you.
That'd be great.
We can get it to you by the end of this week.
That's fine. I'm sure we have lots of time. One of the things that I'll mention about the timing on this thing, again, it's my guess, optimistically, that we'll know the exact amounts and timing of the 15 grants by this spring. If things go as people hope they will in Congress, we may have a fair idea of what the 16 funding level will be sometimes in the fall. Again, assuming Congress is intent on getting their appropriations bills done on a timely manner. So one of the reasons to sort of hold back is that you might be able to have a pretty good idea of what to expect before you are obligating the bulk of this year's, or the bulk of the 15 grant. That's what I'm hoping, so that it may be a year-to-year proposition, but it may be a year-to-year proposition in time for you to at least try to manage and stabilize funding. Let's see. Michael's asking, what is the process for requesting match waiver? Does anybody, I think it's simply a matter of contacting your grant monitor. I don't think there's any particular form or request. Is there anybody, I got a couple of hands raised here, which I'll get to, but can anybody, has anybody experienced requesting a match waiver that you can help answer that question? If you do, I'm not sure. I think, Michael, we'll find out, but I think there's no formal way of doing it. Just contact your, okay, Joe's got, okay, I'm going to go Daisy. I'm going in order. Daisy, you are unmuted, I think. You had your hand raised, but you needed to enter your PIN, your audio PIN. I can't unmute you. So I will go ahead. Jason, you're unmuted.
Hey, Steve. Hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. I want to talk a little bit more about match, because I really think that this is going to be one of the largest issues states across the country are going to face in terms of being able to spend the type of money that we're talking about. I think, I know at least in my state, if there's not something done about the match, I am definitely going to have folks, particularly in the rural areas where they need the help the most, that are not going to be able to benefit from the increase because they're not going to be able to come up with the match dollars to even ask for the increased amounts that they probably desperately need. You know, and from the discussion earlier, it sounds like OVC is going to approach the match issue on a case-by-case basis. I hope they're ready because they might get about 300 case-by-case requests for match waivers from my state alone. Because there's no way that we're going to be able to expend what we're potentially going to get if we're having with you know, standard match. So I really think that there needs to be some strong discussions with them about coming up with a process and realizing the realities of what we're being asked to do. I also think that it should be notable, I know, at least in my state, that the match requirement, it does nothing but create problems. It's also one of the largest creators of the obligations. It's a very likely scenario that a grantee will get a grant from my office with a commitment for a certain amount of match, and then at the end of the grant, they've fallen short on match and end up having to come in and reduce the budget and ultimately deobligate funds. So, you know, if we want to avoid the obligations, one way to address that problem is to cut us a little bit of slack on the match.
Jason, let me ask you this, and if others want to chime in, let me know. Would a lower match, if there was a lower match, right now the match is 20% of the total project, what do you think would be a reasonable level for match, or simply eliminate match entirely?
My preference would be to eliminate it entirely because it does nothing but create problems for us. It's one of our #1 monitoring findings. It does nothing but create issues in my state. What could we potentially come up with? I think we're maxed out right now. What we're giving them right now is about all we can give. Just because we get an increased award doesn't mean that our grantees are going to be able to find additional sources of match. I don't see anything incentivizing additional sources of match.
When this webinar is over, there'll be a survey question. I don't think I can go in and edit it now, but I think later on, either through the webinar follow-up or a separate follow-up, I think there's some questions that would be very helpful to get a polling. So one of the questions will be about match, whether there's a consensus about eliminating match entirely, eliminating match for certain types of projects, or lowering match. Because I think that is something that that can be addressed. As I said earlier, match is entirely an administrative creation. It's not required by the statute, so OVC should have some flexibility in making those exceptions, and it would be very helpful to get a consensus as to how to address that. I certainly agree that that's going to be a major problem. Let me see if I can get another question. Janet is asking, are vehicles allowable? Right now, under the current guidelines, you can use VOCA funds to lease or purchase vehicles. Under the proposed regs, you'll be able to lease but not or allow programs to lease but not purchase. One of the comments that our NAVAA made to the proposed regs was to continue allowing the purchase of vehicles if it's demonstrated that that there's a need. One response here back to the other question, Vermont holds back about 25%. I'm going through some of the written comments here. Derek from Alabama says they may hire temporary staff. Okay. We got some questions on the PMTs. We'll get to that in a minute. Sharon, can you give us some history on the ups and downs of the money coming in and the caps? Why would we assume it would be a one-time increase? Well, I can give you my whole VOCA 101. There actually tends to be sort of a pattern to the deposits, where it jumps up and then it gradually goes down. Recent years, it's just been going up. We know, for example, through December of this year, $1.4 billion has been deposited, and that was because of, frankly, a single $1 billion fine that was originally supposed to be paid last year, but the sentencing was delayed. But still, the issue is the money, the balance in the fund is continually growing. So even with think of it this way. Last year, there was $3.5 billion deposited into the fund. A cap of $2.3 billion is still growing the balance in the fund, even though it's a huge increase. One of the problems or issues that I raise sometimes with members of Congress who say, let's just get rid of the caps, is that we don't want to get rid of it all at once. We want to draw it down in a reasonable, manageable way. The reason Sharon's asking, why would we assume it could be a one-time increase? We simply don't know. It could be, as I said, there's speculation that maybe the appropriators are saying, well, we keep getting asked for more VOCA funds. Let's release it and see how it goes. That's why I think things such as deobligation is going to be critical. Now, we may not know about deobligations for 3 or 4 years, and so it may, it may not be an immediate answer, but they're going to monitor us. They're going to have the Inspector General monitoring us. OVC is going to be monitoring us. They're going to be tracking this. And it could be that the appropriators are simply doing this, as I said earlier, just to retain their committee's jurisdiction to control the spending. I can't give you a definitive answer because we don't know the answer to that. That's one of the unknown unknowns. I'm going to Daisy. I unmuted you. Do you have something you want to say?
Steve, it's Lynn from Pennsylvania.
Oh, hi, Lynn.
Hi.
I'm glad you're on.
We're not anywhere near the prior state in divvying out the dollars, but what we're doing in Pennsylvania is we're proceeding as if it's a one-time infusion of money, but at the same time we set up a strategic planning session where we're collecting, analyzing, and prioritizing all the potential short, mid, and long-term needs. We do that through a Victim Service Advisory Committee, which is really diverse. It's state agency heads and also like coalitions against domestic violence, PCAR, it could be executive directors from programs. So all of our stakeholders come together and we're going to have that strategic planning piece. The one thing that we have done is we know we want to put like, and I don't know what else to call it, but like a good faith amount out to the field, but also be very careful in how we distribute this money. What we did is we looked at our 2000 allocations and determined what that allocation would look like in 2014, factoring in the rate of inflation. So for Pennsylvania, that ended up being about 12%. So that's sort of our baseline as to what we know we're going to give out immediately to VOCA recipients. In the meantime, we're also starting to have discussions based on the survey data that you mentioned earlier to see maybe the 12% isn't enough, and if we could provide another one-time infusion or an additional increase, how much would that increase look like? We're probably going to be somewhere around 25% for the first time, and then with all the other money, that's just really going to be part of a strategic planning discussion. It doesn't mean we're going to pass all of that money onto the programs. It doesn't mean we wouldn't, but we want to just step back and take a chance that take some time to have a full strategic planning session to figure out what the needs are in Pennsylvania. Okay. And also doing a staff assessment in the process.
And Pennsylvania distributes its money in a somewhat different fashion than most states. You allocate it to local boards to make actual funding decisions. Is that right?
Correct. So we have a funding formula based on crime, population, and then also a percentage of how well they collect penalties.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned, I think you said it was 12%. One of the arguments that we would make to raise the cap was comparing 2000, when Congress first started capping the funds, to the current funding level in real dollars, that is considering inflation. And across the board, I believe the amount, I don't have it in front of me,
It was 17.
is like, I think it was something like 11% in FY14. It varies from year to year, but in other words, the grants in 2014 were 11% less in real inflation-adjusted dollars than the grants that were awarded in 2000. So that would even just be considered a catch-up
Right.
to get back to that level.
Yeah, that's a good starting point
Right,
to put on the table.
right. Okay, thanks. And Rosemary. Rosemary, I've unmuted you. Okay. I see on your written comment you say 5% match or no match. Karen in North Carolina is asking, will there be any modification in allowable or unallowable costs? As an example, would there be chance to use grant funding to provide victim advocates to work with law enforcement agencies either within the agency or through a collaborative grant program? Well, victim advocates can be placed in law enforcement agencies now, so that certainly is an allowable cost under the current. It's always been allowable to have, as long as they're doing direct services, there's no reason that they couldn't be located in. I funded a program both in a police agency and in a nonprofit who was located within the police agency, so either strategy is certainly allowable. Again, what we're facing here this year, right now, I should say, is simply an increase in dollars. There's no change in the statutes. There's no, other than the proposed regs, which haven't taken effect, there's no change in the current guidelines. So the current rules, for the time being at least, apply. Let me mention that there is there's consideration being given to making statutory changes. Match is certainly one of the issues that is being addressed, along with other issues. Most of those are things that would be prospective. So if any legislation were to be enacted, most of those changes wouldn't take effect this year, although there's some possibility of making some provisions retroactive. Let me see. Rosemary, you're still unmuted if you want to say something. Maybe not. Joe? Can you?
Yes.
Hi. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry about the technical difficulty.
That's okay.
I had to revert to the old-fashioned telephone. I just had you guys are going to be working on getting the 5% admin up. Are you going to add that to the list of things you're going to try to?
We have been trying to do that for over a decade, and we continue to do it. I can say that it generally is not met with a whole lot of positive response. There are some other strategies we're also looking at that might help alleviate some of that problem. For example, splitting off the admin and training so that the admin might stay at 5%, but there would be going back to what we had before, where the training was in addition to what you could use for admin.
Yeah, that'll only give 1%.
It depends on the amount. We're not fixed at 1% on that, Joe, but I'm just saying so far we have not been successful in getting the admin raised. There was a period of time where we had support in Congress. This is going back maybe 12 years, but there again they were only going to raise it to 7%. I think, to me, trying to get the admin raised is assumed whenever we do anything.
Yeah, the problem with me in the state right now is that we don't have any state funds coming into VOCA at all. So it's basically all federal. And as the amounts increase, small states such as Rhode Island, there's a difficult squeeze because you got more responsibility as more money comes in, but you don't have the resources to meet those responsibilities all the time. If it's not FTEs, more FTEs than technology, which obviously we can't afford here. But I can't even, like I say, I can't even get into this go-to meeting using my computer. I have to use a telephone.
Yeah.
so it's difficult.
Yeah. No,
When do they realize that there are some states who need the admin money when the program folds and gets destroyed? I don't know. Some states are fine. Some of the biggest states, they have staffs. That's great. But for a state the size of Rhode Island, with the problems they have, being in the deficits they face, I don't see any state money coming in to help us out here.
No, I completely understand and agree with you. I can only tell you the response recently is, well, you're going to be getting 4 times that amount now with the larger VOCA grant. The other thing I'll comment on, again, this is sort of unofficial, so don't quote me on it, but I do know, and I've had some discussions with OVC about using the increase in their discretionary grants to support states in managing these funds, and I think they're sympathetic to that as well. And I think not only in terms of the technology stuff, which you mentioned, Joe, but I've also been pushing them, as I would push you, to take a serious look at the whole issue of training and professional development. Because, again, I'll repeat, my personal concern is we're going to be hiring a lot of new people who may or may not know what they're doing in working with victims, and we have to be very conscious about that and do what we can. And I think the requirement for training goes from both OVC, the states, and the individual sub-grantees. We should be very conscious of that.
Totally in agreement about that.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Jeff, you're still unmuted. I don't know if you want to say anything. Your hand is raised. In Maine? Oh, you're self-muted, so you would have to unmute yourself. Jeff, are you there? Okay. I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here. I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay. Your hand keeps getting raised, so. All right, I'll unraise you and unmute you. Okay. I'm going back to the list of questions. I hope I didn't miss anybody here. Donna's asking, what kind of planning are states undertaking to assist in strategizing how to spend? Current survey grantees, having focus groups, public meetings. Does anybody want to raise your hand and comment on your strategic planning, needs assessments, things of that nature? Okay, well, you heard, Donna, some strategies in terms of spreading out the money, looking at current needs and that. Jason's asking, is there any word from OVC on proposed requirement to require states to conduct site visits on subgrantees at least once every 3 years? That would result in the need for additional staff. No, I haven't heard anything specifically about that with respect to the proposed regs. I do know, well, this doesn't go on with the site visits, but that's a good point also. Michael, can we do more prevention, right? We can do more prevention, right? As I said, there's no substantive changes right now. My problem with prevention is it depends on what you mean by prevention, because I think there's different things that would fall under that definition. Dan Cooper, regarding, oh, that's Rosemary. Rosemary, you're unmuted.
Steve, can you hear me?
I can.
Yay! Okay, my concern was about the smaller states. I think it was Ron Ronnie, I had the same question about the smaller states being able to manage. Like with Mississippi, I have no staff. I am it. And for me to receive about $18 million estimated, and we don't have state funds, unlike other states, I really don't have but 2 years to expend those funds. There was no way in this world that Mississippi can expend $9 million every year. No way.
See, and that's going to be a challenge because that's one of the things that they're going to look at. If you can't spend it, that means you don't need it.
But Steve, have they ever considered giving it out over a period of two to 3 years?
Well, but you do have that now. You do have that period of 3 to 4 years.
No, I'm talking about award-wise. So instead of saying they're going to give us $4 million, have they ever thought about the fact, okay, that's a lot of money. Can't we look at giving states double for the next consecutive 4 years? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but this may be the first, we don't know. This may be the first of a 4-year cycle of $2 billion caps.
Steve, can I ask a question? Why don't we know?
Because nobody's telling. It's all within the appropriation committees.
Okay, because they're looking at they're looking at the top end, but they're not looking at the fact that you have states that have to manage this.
Well, I completely agree, and that's one of the things that I keep trying to explain to them. And there are different strategies. One of the things that we're looking at also is proposing by statute to expand instead of the year plus 3 to go to the year plus 5 to give you more time to spread it out.
And that would be feasible as well. That would be great.
There's different strategies to do that.
Because I can tell you right now, states like California and Texas, you're talking about little states like Mississippi sending back. They're going to have to send back money too. Those are big states.
Well,
that's a lot of money to try to get out.
I don't know if more staff is going to help you spend down the money, but I can tell you that, again, as we said before with the admin, the response is you're going to get 4 times the admin. I think.
But if I get to put under admin, Steve, I'm still looking at the fact that that's only 2 to 3 years. Me bringing someone in for 2 to 3 years, and then they're gone because they can't afford them after that.
No, I agree, and that's why I say I think the problem isn't necessarily even having the dollars up front, but will a state hire more state employees?
Right.
There are some states, I know in my state, they have a position called a federal project position. You're only working as long as there's federal money coming in.
Well,
so it may vary from state to state. Right. I know. So I'll share with you another source of possible resistance, and this is what we've run into very often when we raise the idea of increasing the administrative match, and each of you can maybe help out on this. It's the coalitions.
Right.
The coalitions, the national coalitions and the state coalitions, I really don't think it's the local direct service providers so much as the coalitions who feel the more the state keeps, the less is going to our members, without recognizing the problem both in terms of the de-obligations, which may end up costing everybody funding, but also the quality, the training, the support. Many states work through their state coalitions, but I think you need to help educate your coalitions to educate their national coalitions as to why this is important.
You're right about that, but it seems like for some reason, I know in most states and the states that I've dealt with, the coalitions work against us. Well,
we know about your state.
You know about it.
I know your state. All right. We won't go there. Let's see. I'm going back to the list. Unless somebody else wants to raise their hand and have something to say. Dan in Massachusetts, regarding match, if we do not receive anything substantive from OVC by the time awards regarding match, could we request a match waiver for the entirety of the FY15 award? For example, add an attachment to the application with the statement we request a match waiver. I can't speak for OVC. As I said, if you did that for each sub-grantee, I don't even know whether or what criteria OVC would use to approve a match waiver. I suppose you can do it for each individual subgrantee. Why not? At least it's worth a try. Although I think the way it would work is the state would request the waiver from OVC for a specific subgrantee. So you might want to do that in bulk. I'd like to know, if you try that, how it works out. There's no stated criteria. The only criteria that I'm familiar with that they've expressed in terms of justifying the waiver for tribal grants is that they don't have access to enough resources, and so it would be counterproductive. Our comment to the proposed regs in that regard was, if that's true for tribal grants, it should be true for any grant, and they should apply the same criteria to match waivers for tribal as well as non-tribal projects. There have been some states I'm aware of that have gotten waivers for specific projects, and so maybe we can learn from that. I don't know what reasons were given to justify the match waiver, but certainly that's something I will follow up with OVC to see if they have any stated criteria to advise you on. Question from Chris in Washington: will compensation folks be seeing increases also? In terms of VOCA dollar grants, the answer is no. In terms of increased demands, probably. A lot of the compensation programs get applications because there are a lot of victim advocates out there. So if we're funding a lot more advocates, they can expect to see a lot more requests for compensation. But under the formula, state compensation programs will not see any of the increase in the VOCA cap. Okay, what types of prevention work are allowed? Again, it sort of depends on what you're talking about. Does anybody want to jump in on prevention? Is anybody funding what you would consider prevention programs? Certainly things like batterer intervention programs and stuff like that. I would say I don't know offhand, frankly. If anybody has any suggestions, raise your hand. I don't see any. Okay, Randy says Hawaii is working on spending plan. However, we would work on a conduit system. Has there been any discussion regarding the competitive process and recompeting at least every 5 years? Randy. You're unmuted, Randy. Could you explain what, as far as the competitive process and recompeting at least 5 years, that's in the proposed OVC regs, and I understand it sounds to me like they're digging their heels in on that. Could you explain what you mean by a conduit system? You're unmuted, Randy, in Hawaii. Randy, are you there? Randy's not there. She's in Hawaii. I'm in Wisconsin, where we have a high of -7 today. So, okay. Ricky from California.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I was just calling in about the match waivers. So what we do in California, sounds like there's a feedback here, but we submit a letter to OVC and list all the recipients that are requesting a match waiver. And those recipients have to send us a letter explaining why they need it. And then it goes through an approval, and OVC sends us a letter saying that it's been approved.
Okay, Ricky, I understand California had asked for like a statewide waiver. Is that right?
No, it's actually specific to certain recipients. It's on an individual recipient basis.
Okay, that because OVC said to me that California had requested a statewide waiver, which they were not allowed to approve because of this case-by-case requirement.
Okay, we might have done that in the past.
Okay.
But the last time I submitted a list of recipients. and then their letters to us.
So you just submit a list of subgrantees. Do you give a reason for asking the waiver?
Yes, you have to explain the hardship, and then each recipient also sends a letter in, and we send those letters to OVC as well.
Do they need to provide any sort of documentation, or just they take their word for it?
No, it's just what's in their letter. They don't supply any backup documentation.
Okay. So that might help. Just send a letter. Dan, according to what your question is, you might want to just include a request to OVC for each subgrantee. Thanks, Ricky. Mary, can VOCA support SANE nurses? Yes. How long does it take OVC to respond to a match waiver request? Ricky, I unmuted you. How long does it usually take?
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I can't remember. It's not that long of a period, and we actually do it after we get the award. I want to say maybe a couple weeks, something like that, maybe more.
All right. Well, I'll follow up with OVC to see what kind of general rules or procedures they want to follow on that there's a great deal of interest in pursuing that. Okay. Have any been denied? Michael's asking more on match waivers. We'll look into that question. And finally, Kara, are any states doping prevention with boys and men and educating them? Doing prevention with boys and men and educating them on DV and sexual assault. Are any states doing prevention with boys and men and educating them on domestic violence and sexual assault? My answer is that that's probably not allowable under VOCA, but if anybody wants to contradict me, that would be fine too. I don't think that kind of prevention is allowable, at least not explicitly in that manner. There's sometimes ways of doing things without calling it that. Gary? Gary, I'm trying to unmute you. You're self-muted, Gary. Did you want to say something? You have to unmute.
Yeah, it's
okay. Yeah, we got your echo.
Oh, sorry. So let's talk about supplantation. How do you receive this amount of additional funding without somebody saying, hey, wait a minute, you were already funding that with another source. You can't switch it over now.
The question is, how do you avoid supplantation? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Don't reduce state funding for the same things. And if you do reduce state funding for the same things, don't say you're doing it because you're getting more federal funds. Does anybody else have any response to the question on supplantation? My feeling is any state that gets caught supplanting deserves it, because there's so many ways to justify or to work around it. Okay. I think that's about it. What I'd like to do now is turn quickly, or spend as much time as you want, on the performance measures. As you know, everybody got an email on behalf of Joy. Okay. I'm sorry, I had some background noise. I think everybody got an email on behalf of Joy Frost about performance measures, and that included a revised version of the form that was distributed in Boston in August. Okay, I have to give me a second here. I sort of lost my place. Okay, I'm back. You all got this email on behalf of Joy. I pulled out the one sentence that really caught my attention among a number of sentences, which says that while they recognize the issues of cost and timing are real, OVC has stated on numerous occasions that you were reporting the same set of data starting on January 1st, but just into a new data system. Now, I have heard from several different sources that OVC is under the impression that states are already collecting the data they're asking for on the PMTs. I don't know why they have that impression, but they do. And so one of the things I would like to spend just a minute on is I have a number of questions, polling questions that I'd like to run through pretty quickly, and I think this can help put some of these questions into a context. So if you don't mind, I'm going to launch these in a fairly rapid way. I'm not going to show you here the responses, but if you just take a minute to respond to these as quickly as you can, there's about 10 or 11 of these questions that I hope will be useful in helping put some of this into some context. So the first question is, how currently are you collecting data from your subgrantees? I'll share the responses with you later after we go through the, maybe after the webinar, because I don't want to take too much time on doing this. So we've got, okay, we've got about 3/4 of you voting. And I will close this question. As I said, I have about 10 of these questions I hope we can do pretty quickly. Okay, I'm going to close it in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and I should mention, if there's more than one person per state, I hope you just, one person from the state respond. Thank you. Okay, next question. Does your state use a grant management system to collect data? Do your state. Should be does your state. Somebody needs to proofread me. Okay, we've got about, so again, please, one per state if you can coordinate that. All right. We got about 60% responding. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, that one's closed. Next one. If you do have a system on place, can your subgrantees directly enter or upload those into your system? Looks like we're running about 50-50 on those. The no's are taking the lead. I get a running count of where the votes are coming in. All right, 10, 9. Only about half of you have voted, so 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. We're not getting any more. I'll close that one. Okay, next. These are, let's see, these are multiple choice. Does your state use the same categories that OVC is proposing for race, gender, race, ethnicity, gender, or age? Do they use the same? If they use the same categories, just check which category uses the same categories that OVC is proposing. I hope that's clear. I hope you've seen those categories in the proposed report. Obviously, we're trying to see how much change or differences between what they want you to do and what you're doing now. And I should mention, as you got in that email, there's a meeting on Monday with 6 administrators, all of whom are on this webinar, so I'm hoping that this will help inform their discussion when they meet with OVC. Okay. Again, we have about half of you voting so far. We'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, next question. Similar question. Does your state currently collect data on the following types of victimizations? Check all that apply. If you do, these are contained in OVC's revised PMT. So let us know if there are any of those that that you're currently collecting. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to close this one off. And same question for these types of victimization. Are you currently collecting this kind of data? You have about half of you responding. If you don't, that's fine. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, got just a couple more. Okay. Do you collect data on where services are provided? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close that. Just a couple more. Okay, next one is where services are provided. I'm sorry, where the victimization occurred. Okay. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. How frequently do you ask subgrantees to report on their goals and objectives? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close that one. All right, we're almost done. Okay. Do you typically collect information on these outcomes or target behaviors? Check all that apply. These are in the revised PMT. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the last one on these additional outcomes and target behaviors. Do you collect information on that? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate your taking the time to do this. And so these are some of the questions. We've collected comments from states and subgrantees. This is sort of a summary of the comments that I've received. Concerns that one size doesn't fit all. There are different agencies, victims types. We'd like to see it conformed with VOCA and VPSA. Questions as to relevance. A number of the questions are unclear, at least in the way they're presented, as to whether it's the state or the subgrantees that are supposed to respond. Who determines evidence-based? There was a real sense that some of the target behaviors were too difficult or offensive to ask victims. Some of the questions or activities were not eligible for VOCA funding. The one that stands out in my mind is on their version of SARS. They ask what kinds of for-profit organizations you're funding when VOCA doesn't allow you to do that. Concern that it takes too much time away from serving victims and that there'll be costs in terms of time and dollars to change your system. So I'm going to try to bring up a copy. I don't have it here. Of the form. Okay, give me a second. I got lost. Okay, there's the form. I'd like to spend a few minutes. If anybody has any comments about the form, I'm just going to scroll through it. And if you have any questions or concerns or comments, this is the SARS database or the SARS information. I'm trying to monitor. Just raise your hand or put something in the chat if there's any comments or questions that you have. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. It's what you're doing now. There was a question raised about why you're asked to check only one primary use of the funds, since most programs are doing more than one type of service. Some of these are, I have a question about crime victim compensation. You can't use VOCA funds to pay compensation. It does say assistance, which is fine, but same with public benefits. You can assist in applying for public benefits, but not pay public benefits. Again, if anybody has any particular comments, again, the people who will be meeting are participating in the webinar, so please feel free to share your input. There's a question here, will subgrantees be able to enter their own information into the system, which is possible with other funding sources under BJA? It's my understanding from OBC that it will be up to the state. The state can either have their subgrantees enter it directly or have the state enter it on behalf of the subgrantees, but it's got to be either all subgrantees or the state. You can't say some subgrantees can do it, but not others. So it's either all subgrantees or the state. Implementing organization type. We've had some comments. For example, there's statewide, countywide, There are some programs that are multi-county. Again, I'm not going to go through all of the comments. Rob Gallup is at, when do they want this? By March 31st. Well, according to their instructions, the first 2 quarters are to be submitted by April. Let me go back to the beginning here. What they say is for the first 2 reporting periods, OVC will allow grantees to submit October through December and January through March by April. Joy, or the email sent on behalf of Joy, said, or possibly later. And obviously, we can't answer that. Here's the one that got my attention. For-profit organizations, which is not allowed by statute. I'm just seeing if there are any other... There's some questions here about this box, about subrecipients, the total organization agency budget. It's not clear what the scope of that is. If you fund a prosecutor's office, are you talking about all prosecutors and staff, or are you just talking about victim services? Some of these questions, the amount of FTEs funded through the VOCA award. When they say VOCA award, I'm reading that to mean just the VOCA dollars. So when it says number of volunteers supporting the work of this VOCA award, is that just the volunteers being used as match for the federal dollars? Or is this all volunteers in the agency? That's not exactly clear. Again, we went through some of these demographic categories. So I won't dwell on that. If anybody wants to comment, please raise your hand. We've gone through these. Gary, will they need to differentiate between primary and secondary victims? You know, one of the questions about numbers of victims is, say, like, it just talks about the number of victims. I would say, you know, that's probably up to the state. What isn't clear to me is if this is total victims and not just new victims served during the reporting period, then we're going to get duplicated numbers. You're not going to be able to aggregate them over, say, a year or a period of time because you're serving victims in more than one quarter in many occasions. So there won't be an unduplicated total number of victims served. I should point out, as other people have, it says the number for each category should total the number of victims reported in item number 3. There is no item number 3, so that's the challenge. Gene, if we have more comments, concerns to add, should we email you or anyone else? You can email me and I can forward it to the group meeting. Actually, we set up a conference call for tomorrow to further discuss this and share the results of the survey. So if you email me that, I'd be glad to share it with the people at the meeting. Again, we're going through this quickly. Direct services every 3 months. They did remove a couple of questions that were on the first draft about evidence-based. They're not asking for amount of money, just numbers of victims served. Still raises a question as to what's evidence-based. They changed some terminology. There's not much change substantively from the original draft. Here again is the same numbers of services. Some of this seems to be a duplication of what was reported above. And here we get to the outcomes and target behaviors, and I'll be interested in sort of looking over the responses to your survey. This is probably the area that we got as many comments on as any other, particularly from programs that are working in counseling, feeling that it's very difficult to assess this. It's not fair. Change, for example, can be positive or negative. And to expect that you're going to be collecting this data from victims on a quarterly basis is going to be not only of no great validity, but very intrusive and difficult to validate. Re-victimization is another area that we received a lot of comments about. Questions as to what they mean by that. Is it the same crime? Is it a different crime? How are they going to know that somebody's been re-victimized? You know, this is all stuff you're going to have to get, or the local programs are going to have to get from victims. Education and coordination activities. It's not clear whether you're talking about the state or subgrantees. Some of these things are things subgrantees are not allowed to do, or at least not allowed to do with VOCA funding. And it doesn't really clarify whether it's just what the agency does or what they do with VOCA funding. Same thing with these quarterly narratives. And the same thing is true with some of the annual narratives, whether these are state. It talks about, for example, your victim assistance program. Well, that to me suggests it's talking about the local programs, or perhaps they mean the state VOCA assistance program. That's not clear. I know this was raised with the compensation one. Outline staffing retention issues that your program has and why. Well, is the state VOCA assistance program, are you talking about the state having staffing problems? Are you going to tell OVC, yeah, you know, we're having problems in our office? Or are they talking about subgrantees? It's just not clear. Okay. Okay, I've got a couple of written comments on this. When will we be trained on this system? That's an excellent question. And I think OVC says in the email that you'll be getting training. It's not very clear when. Not only when will the states be trained, but when will the states and or OVC be training the thousands of subgrantees out there? And is the training, I assume states are going to have to make adaptations to their current collection systems. Is there going to be training after that takes place? So that there's a lot of questions like that. Chris says there have been very few changes since August. What makes you think any other changes will be possible? I think changes are possible, Chris, because you're going to be meeting with OVC, and you're going to ensure that changes will be made. From Sarah, we do not currently collect the majority of the information, at least not in the same format, and I do not know how we can go back to October and get this information. Will there be some consideration given concerning quality or missing data reported, or should we expect our funding to be held until we're able to report this? We have to have time to train our programs and establish data collection tools. I think those are all very excellent points. I think OVC's response, and I think this was in the email that was sent out, there'll be no penalty, that you're not necessarily expected to have complete valid data right away. It's my impression they believe that one of the reasons they want to do this on a quarterly basis is that as it progresses, the data will be better and better. So I don't think there's hard and fast expectation that you'll have everything up and running 100% right away. And they've made it clear that this will not have anything to do with your funding or putting a hold on drawdowns or anything else like that. Okay, Robert, can agencies put in non-applicable for outcomes as many are not applicable NA? I think that's a good question that we'll see if the group can get an answer for. That's a good suggestion. Okay, anybody else have anything to add or any other questions? I think that's about it. Again, I appreciate your taking the time. I know there's a lot of expectation and anxiousness about how this is all going to happen. And as I said at the outset, realize that you're juggling a lot of new challenges, and whatever we can do to help, please feel free to let me know, email, call me, and we will. We're trying to help facilitate any of these changes. I will be I'll be posting the PowerPoint, but I will also, as I said earlier, be posting a recording of this webinar on the website. I'll be sending out a listserv message when that becomes available. So with that, please feel free to continue to send me emails or any of the board members or anyone else. I'm particularly interested, again, as I alluded to earlier, if there are any particular changes in terms of the funding, in terms of match, or other suggestions. You will be getting a follow-up survey asking for ways in which we can make improvements, so I hope you'll respond to that. With that, good luck, and again, let me know if you have questions or concerns that we can help address. So with that, thanks very much and good night.